This is Warroad History Interview number 3. Today is Thursday, February 27th, 2025. I'm Ron Tweet with Brady Swanson at the Warroad Heritage Center. And our guest today is Dave Kleven, who was the last owner, operator, and captain of the well-known lake boat, the Resolute. Today we look forward to hearing Dave's personal stories of the Resolute and the many trips he made to the island resorts in Kenora, Ontario at the north end of the lake. So welcome, Dave.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about where you were born and raised.
I was born in Sprague, Manitoba in 1938. My dad worked for Canadian National Railroad. My mother was from Warroad. And we moved to Warroad in 1939. I was 1 year old. I grew up in Warroad, went to school in Warroad.
Okay. Perfect. Where in Warroad did you live? Where was your family's home?
1 mile north of here.
Okay. Near where I suppose the Pepsi plant is today?
The Pepsi is on about the middle of the field.
Oh, okay.
Today where the house was and everything is all grown up with trees.
Okay. Who were some of the neighbors that lived in that section of town? Do you remember?
Across the road from us was Pete Harder lived there. And later he took Pete at that time was manager of Farmers Union Oil Company, which was just a old house with a couple of green and yellow gas pumps in front of it. And I remember he had an old 36 or something Hudson terraplane car driving us to school one morning when it was 40 below zero. Pete was good. And then down at the end where the greenhouse is now, Hagen's, Harry York lived there, which got Marvin Windows started.
Okay.
He was working for Marvin's.
Okay. I've heard that name,
Yeah.
Harry York. Yeah. So, okay, I know in years past or time past, you've talked about your aunt and uncle, and I know old-timers in Warroad remember the name Herb Hardy and Mary Hardy. Can you tell us about Herb Hardy a little bit?
Not much. Herb and my mother didn't get along real good. But yeah, Herb worked for the railroad. Most people that remembered him. He was a little old humpbacked man with a stop sign that stopped the traffic on the railroad out here.
Yeah.
But he'd worked for a section and he had arthritis real bad. And he couldn't do section work anymore, so the railroad gave him that job as watchman on the track.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people talk about him.
Yeah.
They remember him, old timers.
I don't know when he started the store. It was before me. It was in the 30s.
All right.
And they had a little store and Mary ran that.
And where was that store located? Do you remember exactly?
Yeah, it was between where the Warroad Pioneer Building was and Walmer Doyle Chevrolet.
Okay.
Now, what's in there now, I
Yeah.
really haven't paid much attention.
Yeah. I was reading an article in an old Pioneer yesterday, and they talked about school kids running across over there, getting a bottle of pop or a candy bar or after school.
Well, at the end, they called it the candy store because they had all kinds of penny candy, and kids were in there buying 2 cents of this or bubble gum or something.
Yeah. Okay. So, you went to school here, graduated in what year?
1956.
56. That puts you at about 85 years old today? 86. 86 years old.
If God's willing, in another month I'll be 87.
Okay, well, I'm sure he will be. So, Okay, well, today we want to talk mostly about the lake boat, the Resolute, and I know you spent a lot of time on it. So we're just going to go through a lot of information about the boat. Do you remember when it was built?
1921.
Okay, all right. And the boat builder, who was, do you remember who?
I know Al Johnston worked on it, and can't think of names too fast here.
It seems like it was a Nelson.
Yeah, Nelson.
Nelson, I think.
Yeah,
May have
he was a
been.
boat builder. He
Yeah,
built quite
I
a
know
lot
he
of
built
boats.
several boats in town. Yeah,
He built, well, he built your grandfather's boat, didn't he? Yeah,
he did.
yeah.
Yeah,
So it was him and then people helping him,
right.
helpers.
Yeah.
Al Johnston, Alvin's dad, Dorrance's dad, he was a boat builder too.
Okay.
He built a lot of boats. Later, Oscar Johnson built some nice boats, more modern than
I think Oscar Johnson, did he build the Island Queen?
Oscar Johnson built the Island Queen.
I think so. Yeah.
That's another boat that's been kind of forgotten about. Eric Storeen and his son Jack run that boat for several years in the 40s, early 50s. Yeah.
Okay. All right. What kind of wood did they use in building that boat?
The Resolute was built, it was oak ribs, and they were huge. It was well built when it was built. And they were close together.
Okay.
They were about 2 inches square, maybe a little bigger, maybe 2.5 inches square. They were solid because we put new ribs in it in Kenora one time when I was with Faye. And we got the oak. I think we bought it from Chester Peterson, I think, took it up, and the boat builder, Einar Nelson.
Okay.
He had a dry dock 9 miles out of Kenora,
Okay.
Thompson Island. Yeah.
So oak ribs, and then how about planking?
The planking, according to Faye, was all pine, white pine,
Okay.
and the lumber was sod here in Warroad
Okay.
at the time.
All right. How about the size of the boat? Do you remember its dimensions, its beam and length?
It was 62 feet long from the stern to the bow, but it was 12 feet wide.
Okay.
It's narrow for the length, actually, in today's, but the plans were from 1909, and of course they didn't have the power that came along later, even in the 50s.
Yeah. How much draft, how much water would that pull?
It drew about 3.5 feet,
Okay. Yeah.
depending on the load.
How about power? What did they have for power in that boat?
There was a 671 GMC diesel that was it had been for the government. I'm trying to think of the words. See, I have trouble with words sometimes here. Anyway, he bought it. Faye bought it. What am I trying to say?
Bought the engine and...
Yeah, the engine was actually for the Navy. It was the same engine they had in the landing crafts during World War II. It's surplus is the word I'm trying to say. And he bought it surplus and put it in Resolute, and it was a pretty common motor. It was a good engine.
Yeah.
It was about 230 horsepower, something like that.
Wow. Okay. You mentioned going into dry dock. I mean, I assume you put it in dry dock when you had to make repairs, paint it. I mean, was that kind of an annual or
no,
every 2-3 years?
Every 4 years.
Every 4 years.
You had to go under Coast Guard inspection every 4 years. The Coast Guard inspected that boat, so when it was pulled up.
Okay.
And we always got the okay on it but it was getting to the point to where it was old, it was obsolete, it was, you know, an
Had
old
served
boat
its
then.
time.
And,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
built in 1921, 1968 was the last year it ran.
okay.
It was old. It got back and forth across the lake. It was sound enough, you know.
Yeah,
A few leaks in it.
yep. The cabin and lower deck, I mean, it was was it more of a passenger boat or a freight boat, or can you talk about that?
It was more of a freight boat than a passenger boat. Everything down below here was pretty much open except for a few benches along the side. And it was built kind of low for loading fish. See, in the 20s, yet everything was fish in there.
You're talking loading fish boxes now.
Loading fish boxes.
Okay.
And I got into this, it was about the tail end of freighting on Lake of the Woods, because they had the road. And at that time, there was a lot of people starting to take the road. The local people, instead of going in or hauling their freight with a boat, would come into Warroad once a week
Okay.
and get their own stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them for that.
Yeah.
So, but it was an experience. Wow, was it?
So you ran the boat from when to when? It was
From 1964 to 1968, the last
Okay.
4 years it ran.
that was it.
And Faye was along quite a lot of the time. Toward the last couple of years, not so much.
Yeah.
Faye was, well, he was about as old as I am now. He couldn't see very good.
Yeah.
But he had cataract trouble and eye trouble and different things.
Yeah.
You'll find out in another 20 years what I'm talking about.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Cruising speed on that boat, in good conditions, it would run about how fast?
About 12 miles an hour.
Okay.
Figured a lot of people would ask a passenger, how many knots are you doing? Well, that was about 12 knots. Nautical,
Yeah.
mile and an eighth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it took about 3.5 hours. You were going to ask me that next, I think.
Yeah.
It took us about 3.5 hours and good going to get from Warroad to Oak Island.
Okay.
You could figure 4 a lot of times.
Yeah.
You get about halfway across the lake, the passengers start to get restless. When are we going to get there? But we got there.
Well, it's a big body of water. How about the owners of the boat? There were not many owners of that vessel.
Could I say one more thing about
Sure.
what we were talking about here before? You had a southeast wind. It would take you 4.5 hours. Instead of going straight out to Driftwood Point, we had to go quarter into the wind. And southeast wind was the worst because it was coming all the way from Badette, and we'd go inside Gull Rock to Long Point, get out, and then you were starting to get this stuff. And then we'd swing for the west side of Big Island, the channel. What was the original channel? Because Garden Island, Driftwood Bar was mainland in the early days.
Yes, way back, yes.
And you'd go in between Haps Island and west point of Oak Island, and then you'd swing up for Squaw Island Lake, the east side of Oak Island, and go in that channel.
Okay.
So it would take you longer.
Yeah.
And it depended on the drops you had.
I'm curious, were there days it was so rough you didn't go, I'm assuming?
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you a story about that at the end of this.
Okay.
There was quite a few days, and it was always with the southeast wind. It could be blowing 30 miles an hour from the northwest or the west. even northeast wind, you were going into it and you got out past Buffalo Point, it started to calm down because it was breaking from Sandy Beach and Garden Island.
Right. Yeah.
But southeast wind, there's where are you going to go? You're out in the middle of the lake. The wind's coming from Badette. Where are you going to go? So we'd angle into the wind, get outside Long Point for a ways, and it was rough. And then we'd swing the boat so the wind was coming this direction. The Resolute would take a wind off quarter stern or quarter bow, but you didn't want to get hit broadside with it if you could help it. Because it rolled bad. You see, it was long and narrow and soft chines. This was a chine on the boat. And it would roll almost, it would roll down to here, you know. And then when it came back, it didn't come back easy, it would snap. It was exciting.
I'll bet it was.
So that you always kept the wind off of the side this way or this way.
Okay.
Stern wind, that was nice. You'd sit there and just go with it with that fantail and stuff. You'd cheer a little. Yeah.
So let's go back to the owners of the boat. Tell us about the owners a little bit over the years.
Well, I don't know too much about the early days, but Lou Moyer built the boat to haul fish from Garden Island to Warroad. I don't know what he had before that, but he built it. And he sold it to Fay about 1922, 1923, somewhere in there. Fay bought it. Fay said he bought it for $5,000. What a 62-foot boat would cost you today, I couldn't tell you, you know. But yeah, he bought it from Lou Moyer. I don't know why Lou sold it.
Yeah. Then Fay had it for a lot of years.
Well, Fay had it. He had it up till the end. Actually, because he got it back. I mean, it just come to the point where I couldn't afford to run it anymore. In plain English, I went broke.
Yeah.
I couldn't. The times were done. I didn't realize that when I got into it.
Yeah.
But with the road and airplanes and everything that was running then, and we were still hauling people for depression money. $3 trip across the lake.
Jeepers.
Well, your fuel oil was running you $1,000 a year. They gobbled up a lot of fuel.
Yeah. Wow. A couple of other things. When you were running, did they have Marine Band radios then? Did you?
Yeah, we had Marine Band. We had CB.
Okay.
Yeah, we had 2 radios.
Okay. Another thing I've kind of wondered about is, you know, there are 2 anchors there on the bow of the boat, hooked into or tied into the rail there.
Yeah.
Did you ever use the anchors, have to anchor out?
Yeah, once we had an injector go bad and blow the tip off an injector and got down on top of the cylinder and beat it up, and it was right outside of Kenora. And we had to get pulled into Kenora and find a place to get parts. Well, M&O had they had a dry dock and stuff there too, although we never used it.
M&O, do you mean?
Minnesota Ontario Paper Company. What is it now? It's,
it went from that to Boise to, I don't know what it is now.
Boise, I think now, or I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. How about lifeboats or kicker boat? Did you pull a kicker boat behind it?
We never pulled a kicker boat. once in a while, tourists would want us to pull a boat.
Okay.
And they bring their own boat up and going up.
I'm kind of curious.
But,
when you pull a kicker boat like that, how tight do you tie it? Do you put it on a long rope?
We put it on a long rope to get it away from the wash with the propeller.
Okay. About how long if you're 100 foot, or how long
Oh, probably 100, 150 feet maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So when the boat went out of service, you said in 1968 then, do you know what was the deal? I know it was taken out and put on dry dock down here at the point until some vandals set it on fire.
Yeah.
Was that a donated boat to the city, or?
Yeah. A company from Duluth came and took the engine out. Damn it, they even took the wheel off it, and I'd love to have had that wheel that had a Model T hubcap on it, holding it on. It was big. It was,
Yeah.
I don't know, like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
They even took that off.
Yeah.
They took everything they could, and then they pulled it up, and then it got burned up.
Okay. Yeah.
That's not a good thing to do, to pull a wood boat.
I can imagine.
Because it's going to rot.
Yeah.
They did the same thing with burnt steel up at the angle.
Right. Yeah.
Better just to sink it or burn it.
Yeah. So with any job, there's always good and there's always bad. What do you think you probably enjoyed most about operating the boat?
Oh, I don't know. I like working on the lake. I worked on the lake since I was a kid, and I even tried it after a few years after this, fishing. I don't know. I just like being out on the lake. I didn't particularly care for some of the rough days. There's bad days. Sometimes you had a lot of passengers on in tough weather. I'll tell you about a trip I had one time.
Okay.
It wasn't good. You want to hear it now?
Let's hear it now.
I had 50 older ladies from the Minnesota Historical Society to go to Kenora. So we left, the sun was shining, it was a nice morning, and the wind started to pick up a little bit from the southeast. It was supposed to rain. I figured, well, we can get up there before this happens. We didn't, but we got into the Little Travis, made our swing toward Oak Point, Oak Light, and there was a few pretty big crashes of lightning. I remember one bouncing off 4 Block Island. I remember that. You don't forget those things. And anyway, we got up to Kenora, got up in the islands. The wind started blowing out of the southeast, bad. So we got to Kenora all right, and everything went fine. We had to come back the next day. And I had all these people on the boat. I mean, the boat was loaded. You can imagine 50 people in there.
Uh-huh.
But it was pretty good money, and I needed it at that time. If we'd have had good weather, it would have been a beautiful trip. But anyway, coming back, we got down to Oak Island, and it was blowing hard out of the southeast. I mean, blowing hard. Faye was on the boat, too. So we stopped at Hawkins Resort. He always fed the people, and they had dinner. I told Fay, I said, I don't think we're going to get to Warroad. And Fay said, yeah. I said, me too. But we had to try. I stuck the nose off of Oak Point into that wind, and the boat was just heaving, rough, and it was wild. It was tough. It was gusting like 40 miles an hour. And I told Fay, I said, we can't do this. Fay agreed with me. He said, I think we'd better go back. One lady, she tripped and sprained her ankle, had a flyer in. Went back to Oak Island. Harry Hawkins had filled up. Bert Steele had come out with a bunch of passengers. Sunday was his big day, Harry's. And didn't have room for him. So I got on the radio. I called McKeever, Charles McKeever, Flag Island. I said, Charlie, I said, I got a problem. We can't go in. I got all these people. He said, yeah. He said, we can handle it. I don't know where he put them all, and he fed them. So anyway, the next day, I got him off the boat, got the Resolute tied up. It blew. That night, the wind went down some. It changed to the northwest. We had a front. You know how it goes. It blows from the northwest. So coming back, everything was fine. I went down, took a look at things, checked the bilge. Geez, the pump was running pretty hard. So I went up, and Fay was there, and I said, I walked out, started looking around the boat. And in that wind, well, we had northwest wind. It was blowing hard, but northwest was fine. We had to sneak along. We had the Canadian Bar, Buffalo Point, and all that. We tore a piece of tin off the bottom of the boat. So, waves. I mean, it was wild that Sunday afternoon. So we got the people in. They had to charter another bus because their schedule was all messed up. My schedule was all messed up. And we had to go to Kenora, so we lost a week's running out of it. And get these leaks and this metal put on. See, they were all metal. I imagine your grandfather's boat was too, for breaking ice.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But that tin had been on there probably for 30 years then. And it came off. It was out off the side of the boat like that, and the water was spraying off.
Pouring in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, up to Kenora, lost another week, put her on dry dock, filled it, pulled it off, had to take more metal off and smear tar on it.
Okay.
And we were fixed for the rest of the year. And I think that was the last year I ran the boat.
Okay.
You want to know why I quit? But man, oh man, what a headache I had after that.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Say, I'm just curious, when you're talking about putting it in dry dock at Kenora, did they have several dry dock areas where they could pull boats in and work on them?
Well, yeah, in Kenora, like I said, Mando, Boise, whatever it is, no, they had 2 or 3 slips.
Oh.
But they had a lot of boats. I mean, there was some good operators up there hauling these boom logs.
Right.
One thing and another. The Argyle was about 90 feet long, 20 feet wide. They pulled it up. And we went to Thompson Island, and he had one slip to pull a boat up. When the Resolute went up, nothing else came on until it went off. And Lawrence pulled his boat up there too. The boat builder's name was Einar Nelson. He had a guy named Emil Deppner working for him. And Einar was an old boat builder. He was a Swede. He was from Sweden, and he'd built a lot of boats, and he was good. He knew what he was doing, you know. They put new ribs in there and steamed them. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. steam them, and so they can be bent. And,
Yeah, he'd steam them and bend them.
Yeah.
They
Kind of
just
like curving hockey sticks.
go right in. Yeah.
You know, the kids would do the same thing.
Yeah.
They would steam them or get them hot, heat them up,
Yeah.
and bend them.
Steam them.
Any other special events, special happenings that you'd want to share before we?
No. A lot of times, you know, depending on what you had, like going to Oak Island, you might have people here for lake trails. You might have freight over here for Bobby Bray. So you were going around and around the island.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we stopped at Dick Newcomb's. He had a nice place to tie up, and he did a lot of woodwork, so he had a lot of stuff occasionally to go there.
Coming in.
We'd stop at Fort St. Charles quite often with passengers. People would go out sightseeing while we made a stop at Fort St. Charles so they could take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times on Friday, we made a round trip so we could go back out Saturday morning.
Okay.
Saturday, Monday, Wednesday. We had the mail.
Okay.
Hauled some fish from Knights Island a time or two for Hugh Hillborn. He did some work for me on the boat. He said, "No, you can haul some fish for me this summer."
I'm curious, when you went into Knights Island, did you go in there on the east side or the west side?
West side.
The west side.
West side.
Because my grandpa lived there with Hugh.
I remember
last
that.
few years. Yeah, and fished there.
That was about that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember when he was fishing with you. There was nothing left at Garden Island, I guess.
Right. Now, I think you indicated earlier, I mentioned, is it more of a freight boat or passenger boat? But the boat was originally, I think you said, built to haul fish.
Yeah.
Okay. When we talk about freight on the boat, I'm sure you hauled everything, but what was most common to haul on the boat?
Well, we hauled everything, groceries. Gas, you had to be careful with that because you couldn't haul passengers and gas. And we put most of the gas out here on this deck. We could put 4 or 5, 6 drums, barrels. And
were they, what, like 55-gallon drums? Or
55-gallon drums, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of groceries. Like grocery truck would come in and unload. Hart's truck at that time. A lot of beer. A lot of beer went out to Flag Island.
To the Blue-Eyed Chief.
To the Blue-Eyed Chief, Charles McKeever said one time, "You can't buy fish from these guys with money." Beer. So there was one week in particular, I remember we held 200 cases of beer out there at Flag Island.
Man.
And later, summer, I worked for Lawrence. He said, "Geez, I take a lot of beer out there." Yeah. He couldn't get over it because,
Yeah.
And we hauled. Lawrence Bird Steel actually hauled more freight than we did because Bay Store and American Point. We took a lot of stuff up to the Angle too, to Colson's. Yeah.
Okay. I'm kind of curious, when you were talking about hauling 55-gallon drums of gas, can you talk about how they unloaded those and moved them around?
Yeah. Yeah, we had if a lot of times on the round trip day, we could load them down there. We had a ramp and a rope on this ramp. And you just tip them over, roll them down. The guy would hold the ramp, and the rope and come down, tip them on, roll them over
Okay.
in the boat. And we unloaded them the same way.
Okay.
Got a Bert Steele story I'll tell you. If you want to hear it, I'll tell
Yes.
you now.
Yes. Tell
Wilfred
us.
Sardiff, Lawrence Sardiff's brother. He was a big man. He was a huge man. And he had a lifting boat. Most of the lifting boats were about 16 feet long. Well, his was about 20 because he could handle this. And Lawrence had a barrel of gas for Wilford. He was a Wilford's Island. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh.
Well, Madge's Island, Babes, and those little
Oh,
islands in
yes,
there.
by Garden, north of Garden.
Yeah. And he had a place there. And we couldn't get in there you couldn't get in there with a big boat. He'd haul everything out. And he'd load a box of fish like this. 75, 100 pounds of fish. And anyway, we rolled this barrel of gas up for Wilford. And Wilford reached out, picked it up, and set it down on the bottom of the boat so he didn't go through the boat. Holy fright. There's no fooling.
Yeah.
There's no fooling. Well, he kind of had it on his knee,
Sure. That takes a tough man, a strong man to handle that.
They were all tough. They were all good.
Yeah.
They were good people.
Yeah.
All of them. Wilford and Lawrence.
Yeah.
They were good people.
Yeah.
Everybody up there was,
Yeah. Kind of worked together. I mean,
Oh, yeah, Ed Vicarious, he
you
was
had
a
to?
tough old guy. He was a nice guy. He helped me once. We picked up fish there at Ed's, and battery stopped. And he gave me a battery to get to town. No, they were all good people up there, all of them.
yeah. So, all right. We want to talk about a typical day. Let's say it's a Wednesday, and you're heading north. What days did you run? Your regular schedule.
Our regular schedule was Saturday, Monday, going out.
Okay.
Wednesday. Friday, we made a round trip. And then we went out Saturday again.
Okay.
And we had the mail to carry. You had to go to the post office, get the mail, put it in the boat. There was a little place to put the mail. It had to be locked up, And loaded freight in the morning. Sometimes we'd have stuff in the afternoon come in after we came in to load. And then we'd make the rounds.
Okay.
We'd just go across the lake, boat ride. A nice day, that was good. If it was a little windy or rough. Like I said, the only times you had trouble was with a hard southeast wind. That was the only time. But we usually went. There wasn't too many times we laid over. There was a few times.
Okay.
Well, then you had to unload this stuff, make the routes to the Bay Store, the post office. Harry Hawkins always had something or people on there. Passengers would come on.
How many places did you deliver the mail to? Was that a regular?
That was
route?
regular. It was Oak Island had a post office, American Point, post office there, and then the Angle.
Okay. When you say the Angle, are you talking
Pine Creek.
Pine Creek up there? Okay.
Yeah. Colson's.
Yeah. And they
Jake
still have,
Colson was
don't they still
postmaster.
have a post office there, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Risser was running it last
Yes.
I heard.
Yep. Okay. All right. So you'd leave Warroad what time in the morning?
We left at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
8 o'clock, and we're usually up Oak Island by noon.
Okay.
Good going. We were there 11:30, 12 o'clock. Sometimes we were a little late, and then you'd have a bunch of people been standing around waiting for the boat to come for the mail, and all they had to do was gossip. And pretty soon you were getting, you weren't the most popular guy anymore, if you were a little late, But yeah, they were all good people up there.
I'm curious about how long the shipping season was. When would you start? When would you call it quits in the fall?
We were usually done by the 1st of November. There was 1 year, the lake was froze over the 6th of November. So I flew out with Don Anson deer hunting, and the lake was froze over. He landed in Flag Island.
On the ice.
Skis, yeah, on the ice.
Boy,
Yeah.
that's an early freeze up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was the 6th of November. But then sometimes, of course, it's like that now. It might be the end of November before it freezes over.
How about start date? When did you start? Middle of May, 1st of May? Or did
We
you
figured around the 15th
Okay.
most of the time. That was plenty early sometimes, but the ice was usually out by the middle of May.
Okay.
Sometimes it was 20th, maybe a 10th or something, you know. But
Yeah.
we made our first trip the 15th,
Okay.
if we could.
Okay. So you'd get to the islands, do your deliveries, stay over. Did you stay at resorts or stay on the boat? Or
Well, no, we ate at the resorts, usually at the Angle, at Colson's,
okay.
or Flag Island. If a lot of times Sundays we didn't have any mail. I'm getting off of my schedule here. Saturday, if we didn't have any mail.
Okay.
We tied up at Flag Island quite often. Usually either at Flag Island or the Angle Inlet.
Right.
Got to get this right.
Yeah. So then you would you'd eat at the resorts. Did you sleep
Yeah.
there as well? Stay there?
No,
or-
we slept on the boat.
Okay.
There's a couple bunks down under here
Okay.
in the bow of the boat. And Faye always slept up on top. He didn't have any people there at night, so
Okay.
and I got in that habit too because you could feel what was going on outside.
Okay.
Down here, it was, boy, you slept good.
Yeah.
You didn't hear anything.
Well, on a nice night, I can imagine it would be, soft wind and
Yeah.
warm, pleasant. Yeah.
So anyway, that's the way that went.
Okay. Tell us about trips to Kenora, because how often did you run there? Was that on a regular run or?
Well, mostly. We tried to schedule it, didn't work out too good because you couldn't make that run with 2 people and 2 or 3 people, But we ran Kenora on Saturdays, came back Sunday,
Okay.
and that took 7, 8 hours to make it. Well, we had to go through customs, go through all that. We'd get up to Kenora about 4:30 or so, and we had a deal with Northland Hotel, I believe it was,
Okay.
and it was just a couple blocks up from the dock, so the people could get off, and it wasn't very far to walk up there. And we stayed there. Me and the crew stayed on the boat. The crew was one guy working for us. And if Faye was along, well, he liked to go no matter what. He trusted me to go to Kenora, but once in a while he'd.
I was going to ask, was there one main route that you always traveled to Kenora, or were there options?
Well, no, we usually took the one main route up there. Cassia Customs was at Center Island and Oak Island and we had a check-in either way going out, so it just naturally went around customs through by Center Island and then up to Kenora. Don't ask me the names of the island because I'm trying to think of them right now and I can't remember them all.
I was going to ask about checking into customs. I would imagine it was probably a lot harder then, or a lot easier then than it is now traveling through.
Oh yeah, they weren't any problem.
Yeah.
Of course, we got to know the Canadian customs. Buck Webb could be a little tough about it, but he checked people in.
Mm-hmm.
He was more business-like than the Canadians.
Oh, okay.
Which was,
Well,
I like Buck. Buck was a good guy, and he did a good job at Oak Island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when you say Buck, are you talking Buck Webb?
I'm talking Buck Webb.
Okay.
Yeah. Him and his wife, Ducky grew up there, his wife, Grace. It was Ducky.
Yeah, I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, she grew up there, and then they took the store over from her folks, from her dad and mother.
When they would check you in, customs, I mean, did they usually board the boat and check things, or what was common?
Canadians would, they'd look down, take a look down there, see if you had anything.
Okay.
And Buck would too.
Mm-hmm.
Then check out the people, make sure everybody was
right.
American citizens going home.
Good.
They were good.
Uh-huh.
They were good. Both American and Canadian customs were good.
Well, we've had a good interview. I have one other question I wanted to ask, and that's about winter storage. Okay, what did you do? Pull the boat, dry dock, or ice it in? And where was it?
No, the boat was froze in. And the trick to that was making sure it was pointed north and south so the sun was on both sides of the boat. Otherwise, you were going to have a big chunk of ice here and open water here. And I guess that I learned that from Faye, and Lawrence did the same thing. They froze the boat in, and it was right down there off the wall. Where that little building is, where they...
Yes, yep. The water depth or...
The water depth gauge and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And the dock was there, and they just pull it out, drop an anchor so it didn't go anywhere, and freeze it in.
So you said the Resolute, you would ice that in, the birch steel as well. Were there any other boats that were iced in there? Do you recall? Or
no, I don't recall any. I guess in the early days,
probably
there was a lot of freight going on the lake, and there was some really experienced lake people back in those days. And some of the fishermen knew what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some good ones up in Kenora that running tugboats and stuff for the paper company and passenger boats, the old Argyle, and I mean, that was a big boat. And they're going through these narrows around Kenora. And I rode on it once, and that boat was 22 feet wide. You can imagine, there was a wheelhouse in the middle, and you come up to a dock, you couldn't even see anything down there. It was about 3 decks high.
Wow.
It was a big boat.
Yeah.
Ferry boat.
Well, anything else? I think that's...
Oh, I got one.
Okay.
Where did you load all of the stuff?
Freight and passengers. Where did you load here in Warroad?
Well, it was right down where we froze the boat in, down the dock was right there. And then there was this water depth building. I think it's still
Yes.
there. You know, just about where the main dock is now, just a little bit to the east.
I've seen pictures there of the Resolute iced in there. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that was, you know, where Old Booth Fishery had been. Well, that was the busy freight part of everything, and went back for years. It still was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Well, Dave, thank you very much for doing this. It's been a pleasure listening to your stories, and
Well,
it's an art that, or a position that is long gone. Probably won't see those vessels like that on the lake again. So thank you very much.
you're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Well, good. Yeah.